Black CEO told to wait outside. 5 minutes later, she fired them all instead. It was a usual day in the high-rise office building that housed one of the most successful companies in the industry. The air was thick with the sound of clattering keyboards, soft conversations, and the hum of phones ringing. The headquarters, located in the heart of the city, was a symbol of success and prestige, a place where corporate leaders made life-changing decisions. Today, however, something was different. It was the day of an important board meeting that was expected to change the direction of the company. As the clock ticked closer to the scheduled time, the executives made their way to the boardroom. The room was already set with a long table filled with laptops, papers, and cups of coffee. The atmosphere was tense as everyone prepared to discuss the future of the company. The decision they were about to make would impact not only their financial growth, but also the company's reputation in the business world. And then the CEO walked in. Her name was Naomi Harris. At 44, Naomi was not just another businesswoman. She was the CEO of the company, a position she had earned through years of hard work, countless challenges, and unwavering dedication. She was a trailblazer, a black woman who had shattered barriers in a predominantly white and male-dominated industry. Naomi had fought for every inch of respect she had earned, often facing hurdles that many couldn't imagine. Today, however, she was walking into a room full of people who had known her for years, some of them since she had worked her way up the corporate ladder. But today was different. Today, Naomi was not just the CEO, she was a woman who had endured enough. She was tired of the subtle dismissals, the sideways glances, the small but telling gestures that communicated something less than respect. Naomi entered the room with her head held high. She walked in with the confidence of someone who had earned their place, and no one could deny her presence. She had been ready for this meeting for weeks, having prepared every detail meticulously. She had her strategy laid out and knew exactly what direction the company needed to take. But what she wasn't prepared for was the instant snub that would come from one of her senior managers. As Naomi entered the room, she nodded at the executives, but one man, a senior manager who had never quite taken her seriously, looked up from his papers. His expression was cold, almost dismissive as he looked her up and down. Without thinking twice, he muttered under his breath, "You can wait outside. We'll call you when we're ready to begin." His tone was sharp, condescending, and completely inappropriate. For a moment, Naomi was stunned. Her heart skipped a beat and the room seemed to freeze. Her mind raced, but she didn't let her emotions take control. She had been through moments like this before, and every fiber of her being knew that this was not a moment for her to back down. But still, the hurt was there. The audacity of the request stung deeply. She stood in the doorway, her gaze unwavering. The silence in the room was deafening. Every eye was on her, some in confusion, others in disbelief. Naomi's jaw tightened, but she chose not to speak immediately. She simply nodded slowly, the weight of the situation settling in. For a moment, she considered walking away. After all, this wasn't the first time someone had dismissed her based on her race or gender. In fact, it had happened many times before. But this time felt different. It wasn't just one person. It wasn't just a small slight. This was blatant disrespect, and it came from someone who had held power over her company's direction. The thought of allowing it to slide, of letting it go as just another moment of insensitivity, made her feel nauseous. Naomi took a deep breath. She could feel the familiar anger rising in her chest, but she swallowed it down. No, she wouldn't let her anger get the best of her. Instead, she would use it to fuel her next move. With quiet dignity, Naomi turned on her heel and walked out of the boardroom. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, each one carrying the weight of years of struggle, of perseverance, and of a deep understanding that she was capable of much more than what anyone had ever thought of her. Outside the boardroom, she stood alone for a moment. The walls of the office felt smaller now, almost as if they were closing in on her. She could hear the distant hum of activity from the rest of the building, but it felt far away, irrelevant. She didn't care about the noise. She cared about the injustice she had just witnessed. As she stood there, she replayed the moment over and over in her mind. She had fought so hard to get to where she was today. She had faced obstacles that few could ever imagine, racism, sexism, and countless challenges, yet she had made it to the top. She had fought for every promotion, every raise, and every inch of respect. But despite all that, there were still people who saw her as less than. She thought about her journey. The road to becoming a CEO hadn't been easy. She had come from a working-class family, and from an early age she had learned the value of hard work. She had attended prestigious universities, where she had often been the only woman of color in the room, but she had excelled. She had learned to navigate the intricacies of corporate life, the unspoken rules, and the alliances that were often formed in quiet corners of boardrooms. Naomi had earned every promotion, every decision, and every accomplishment. Yet today, despite all of her achievements, despite all of her hard work, she was still treated like an outsider. She was still treated like someone who didn't belong, and that was a feeling she refused to accept any longer. Naomi's mind raced as she considered her options. Should she let it go and continue with the meeting? Should she confront the executive and demand an apology? No, she knew the answer. She didn't need their apologies or their permission to lead. She had earned the right to lead this company, and no one, no matter their rank, had the right to undermine her. She took out her phone, dialing her assistant's number. The decision was made. It was time for a change. As Naomi stood there, one thought echoed in her mind. This was the turning point. This was the moment when everything would change. She wasn't just going to let it go. She was going to make sure that everyone knew exactly what happened when someone crossed the line with her. Naomi stood alone in the hallway, the weight of what had just happened settling deeper into her thoughts. The silence around her seemed to amplify the buzzing in her head, each thought louder than the last. She replayed the incident over and over, trying to make sense of it all. She had come so far, from a young woman who had dreamed of making a difference in the world of business to the CEO of a major corporation. The journey hadn't been easy. Every step forward had come with its challenges, and every victory had been hard won. But she had made it. She had proven herself time and time again. Yet, in a single moment, someone had dismissed her as though all her achievements meant nothing. Naomi's mind flashed back to her early days in the corporate world. She had started from nothing, working long hours in small offices and making her way up one step at a time. She had always known that it would be harder for her. As a woman of color, she faced challenges that many of her colleagues didn't. She had to be twice as good to get half the recognition, and she had learned to push through the doubts that others placed in her path. But she had done it. She had worked harder, thought smarter, and proven time and again that she was capable. Yet here she was again, having to prove her worth, and not just prove it in the eyes of the company, but prove it to the very people who were supposed to support her. The same executives who had worked under her for years, who had seen her growth, had now treated her like she was less than. Naomi shook her head, trying to clear the frustration that clouded her mind. This was not the time for self-pity. This was the time for action. As she stood in the hallway, she realized that this moment wasn't just about one person's rude comment. It was a reflection of a much larger issue. It wasn't just this one senior manager who had disrespected her. It was a pattern of behavior that had existed for far too long. This was the culmination of years of subtle, systemic prejudice. It was the casual dismissals, the unspoken assumptions, the moments where she had been treated like she wasn't in charge, even though the title on her office door said otherwise. Naomi knew that this was her breaking point. This wasn't just about standing up for herself. This was about standing up for all the people who had been told they weren't enough, whether because of their gender, their race, or their background. It was about showing everyone in the company that there was no place for disrespect. She looked down at her phone, her fingers tapping against the screen. Her assistant's name appeared on the screen, and without hesitation, Naomi pressed the call button. As the phone rang, she took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. When her assistant answered, Naomi wasted no time. "I need you to prepare termination papers for the senior executives in the meeting," she said, her voice steady. "I want them ready for immediate delivery." Her assistant hesitated for only a moment. "Are you sure, Naomi? We can still try to handle this internally. Maybe a discussion would." "No," Naomi interrupted, her voice firm. "This is no longer about a discussion. This is about making it clear that I am in charge and that no one is going to treat me like this ever again. I won't tolerate it. Please prepare the papers." Her assistant didn't argue further. "Understood, I'll get it done." Naomi ended the call and stared at her phone for a moment. There was no turning back now. She had made her decision. She wasn't going to let this moment define her in a negative way. She would turn it into something powerful, something that would send a message to everyone in the company that she would not be undermined. With a deep breath, She walked back toward the boardroom, the sound of her heels echoing through the empty hallway. This time, when she opened the door, she would not be walking in as someone who needed to ask for respect. She would be walking in as someone who demanded it. As Naomi entered the room, the energy shifted. The executives who had once treated her as if she were just another face in the crowd now sat in silence, all eyes on her. The man who had so dismissively told her to wait outside looked up from his notes, his face draining of color as he saw the determination in her eyes. She didn't speak immediately. She stood there for a moment, letting the weight of her presence fill the room. She had earned her place in this room, no one had handed it to her. And now it was time for them to recognize that. "Gentlemen," Naomi finally said, her voice calm but carrying the authority of a leader. "I've been told to wait outside. I've been disrespected in front of the entire room, and now I am making a decision. Effective immediately, you are all terminated." The room went completely still. For a few seconds, no one moved or spoke. Naomi could see the disbelief in their eyes as they processed her words. The senior manager who had ordered her to wait outside looked as though he had been struck speechless. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Please," Naomi continued, her voice unwavering. "Don't try to explain, don't make excuses. This isn't about apologies. This is about respect. I am the CEO, and I will not tolerate being treated in this way." She could feel the tension in the room, the palpable shift in the atmosphere. There was no turning back now. She had made her point, and now it was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. The senior manager who had spoken to her so dismissively stood up, his face flushed with anger. "You can't be serious. We've worked together for years." "Exactly," Naomi interrupted, her tone sharp. "And in all that time, I've had to work twice as hard to prove myself, only to be undermined time and time again. But no more. I've had enough." She turned to the others in the room. "I suggest you gather your things. You have a few minutes to leave." The executives hesitated for a moment, but then, one by one, they began to gather their things. Their faces were a mixture of shock, anger, and humiliation. Naomi didn't feel pity for them. She had no time for that. The disrespect she had faced in this room would not be tolerated, and she would not allow them to undermine her again. The atmosphere in the boardroom was thick with tension as the executives scrambled to gather their things. Some of them walked out quietly, still processing the unexpected turn of events. Others muttered under their breath, clearly agitated by Naomi's decision to fire them. But Naomi stood there, unwavering, watching each person leave with a sense of calm determination. This was a moment she would not back down from. As the last executive exited the room, Naomi closed the door behind him. She stood still for a moment, allowing the silence to settle in, the stillness of the room reflecting the clarity she felt inside. She had made the right decision. It wasn't just about the moment of disrespect. It was about making a stand for herself and for everyone who had ever felt silenced or undermined. Naomi walked to the window, looking out over the city. The skyline stretched for miles, a sea of glass and steel beneath her. For a moment, she allowed herself to reflect on everything that had brought her to this point. The sacrifices, the struggles, the times she had doubted herself, it had all led to this one pivotal moment. She had proven to herself that she could handle anything that came her way. She could rise above the challenges, and now she had made a statement that would resonate with everyone in the company. Her assistant called a few minutes later, confirming that the termination papers had been delivered. Naomi nodded as she listened to the report, the satisfaction of her decision settling in. The assistant, ever loyal and supportive, had been with her for years and understood the importance of this moment. But Naomi knew there was still much work to do. Firing the executives was only the first step. The next part of her plan would be critical, rebuilding the company's leadership, and doing so with a focus on diversity, inclusion, and integrity. She had already begun to think about who would replace the executives she had let go. The positions would need to be filled with people who truly shared her vision for the company, people who would support her and respect her leadership. But most importantly, she wanted to bring in leaders who understood that her leadership was not just about making decisions. It was about creating a culture where everyone, regardless of their background, could thrive. Naomi took out her phone again, calling her trusted HR director. They had worked together for years, and Naomi knew that the director understood her commitment to making the company better. As the phone rang, she mentally reviewed the changes she planned to make. This was her chance to reshape the company, to take it to the next level, and to ensure that the culture she had always dreamed of was finally realized. She had always known that the right leaders could make all the difference, and now she had the opportunity to handpick those who would truly make a positive impact. When her HR director answered, Naomi didn't waste any time. "I need you to start the search for new executives. We're looking for people who are not only skilled, but who also understand the importance of diversity and inclusion. I want a leadership team that will work with me, not against me." There was no hesitation in her HR director's response. "Understood. We'll begin the search immediately." Naomi felt a sense of relief as she hung up the phone. The first part of her vision was already in motion. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. She had learned that the hard way over the years. Every setback had been an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to build resilience. This was no different. The next day, Naomi made an announcement to the entire company. The news spread quickly through the building, and employees gathered in conference rooms, around coffee stations, and in hallways, waiting to hear what she had to say. Naomi stood before them, her posture strong and her voice calm as she addressed the staff. "I want to make something very clear," she began. "Yesterday, I made a decision that some of you may have been surprised by. I fired several senior executives who did not respect the values we hold dear at this company. This was not an easy decision, but it was necessary. Respect is a core value here, and I will not tolerate anyone who undermines our vision or disrespects the people who work hard every day to make this company successful." Naomi paused, letting her words sink in. She could see the reactions on the faces of the employees. Some were surprised, others were nodding in agreement. She knew that this was the moment where she could set the tone for what was to come. She wasn't just talking to the people who had been fired. She was speaking to the entire company, reminding them of what they were building together. "We are going to rebuild," she continued, "but we are going to do it the right way. I'm committed to creating a workplace where every single one of you feels valued and heard, where diversity is not just a buzzword, but a reality. I want this company to be a place where we all have the opportunity to succeed, no matter who we are or where we come from." The room was silent for a moment before a round of applause broke out. Naomi felt a surge of pride. She had always believed in the potential of her team, and this was her moment to prove that she would lead them to something better. Over the following weeks, Naomi worked tirelessly to rebuild the leadership team. She brought in new executives, people who were not only experienced but who understood the importance of creating an inclusive, supportive environment. She wanted leaders who would support her vision and help make the company a better place for everyone. It wasn't easy. There were challenges along the way, resistance from some corners of the company, doubts from those who didn't fully understand her vision, and the occasional struggle to find the right people. But Naomi was undeterred. She had made a promise to herself and to the company, and she was going to keep it. She was determined to make this company a place where people could thrive, no matter their background or their position. As the months passed, the company began to change. Naomi saw the transformation not only in the culture of the workplace, but in the results that followed. With a new leadership team in place, the company's performance soared. Productivity increased, innovation flourished, and employees began to feel a renewed sense of ownership in their work. Naomi's commitment to diversity and inclusion was not just a strategy, it was the foundation of the company's success. Naomi had always known that change was possible, but it was up to her to lead the way. And in the end, she realized that the true measure of success wasn't just in the company's profits. It was in the respect, collaboration, and support that flowed through every level of the organization. Naomi's decision to fire the executives was the beginning of a new chapter for the company. In the days that followed, there was a palpable sense of uncertainty in the air. Employees whispered in hallways, wondering what would happen next. Would things really change? Could Naomi rebuild the company's leadership from scratch? But beneath the whispers, there was also a growing sense of hope. Naomi had taken a bold stand, and for many, that was exactly the kind of leadership they had been waiting for. As Naomi worked through the process of rebuilding the leadership team, she focused on what she believed was most important: integrity, vision, and inclusivity. She didn't want to replace the old executives with just anyone. She wanted leaders who truly understood what the company needed, leaders who weren't afraid to challenge the status quo and push for innovation. She didn't just need people with the right qualifications. She needed people who shared her values and understood the importance of creating a workplace where everyone could succeed. The hiring process was a long one. Naomi personally reviewed every application and conducted every interview, making sure that the candidates not only had the skills required for the job, but also had the character and values that aligned with the company's new direction. She looked for candidates who were passionate about diversity, who understood the importance of empowering others, and who had a track record of leading with integrity. It wasn't easy. Naomi knew that she would have to be patient. The old system had been in place for years, and changing it wasn't going to happen overnight. She also knew that there would be challenges along the way, people who were skeptical of the changes she was trying to implement. But Naomi was determined. She knew that real change took time, and she was willing to put in the effort to make sure the company became the place she had always envisioned. A company where respect, collaboration, and opportunity were the cornerstones of its success. Over the weeks that followed, Naomi worked closely with her HR team, helping to refine the hiring process and making sure they were attracting the best talent. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. One by one, new leaders were brought in. These leaders were not only highly skilled professionals, but they also understood what it meant to be part of a team. They knew that leadership wasn't about giving orders. It was about inspiring and empowering others to do their best work. With each new hire, Naomi could feel the company starting to shift. There was a renewed energy in the air. Employees began to feel that change was not just a distant hope, it was happening now. The new leadership team worked together to reshape the company's culture, making it clear that inclusivity and respect were not just buzzwords, but the values that would define the organization going forward. Naomi didn't stop at just hiring new executives. She also worked to ensure that the entire company embraced the changes. She implemented training programs that focused on diversity, communication, and leadership. She wanted everyone, from entry-level employees to senior managers, to feel that they had a voice and that their contributions mattered. She believed that a company could only succeed if everyone was given the tools and opportunities to grow and thrive. As Naomi watched the transformation unfold, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. She had taken a stand when it would have been easier to let things slide. She had made the tough decisions and had stuck to her principles, even when it was difficult. And now she was seeing the results. The company was thriving. Employees were more engaged, more motivated, and more committed to the company's vision than ever before. One of the most rewarding changes for Naomi was the shift in how employees viewed her leadership. Before the firing of the executives, there had always been a certain level of skepticism. Some people had questioned whether Naomi truly belonged in the role of CEO. But now, the respect for her leadership was undeniable. Employees saw that she wasn't afraid to make the tough calls, and they admired her commitment to creating a fair and inclusive workplace. Naomi began to hear more and more stories of employees who felt empowered by the changes. People who had once felt overlooked or marginalized were now stepping up, sharing their ideas, and taking on leadership roles of their own. The new leadership team, led by Naomi, was building something special, something that went beyond profit and productivity. They were building a culture of trust, collaboration, and opportunity. As the company continued to grow, Naomi knew that there would always be challenges ahead. There would be obstacles to overcome, and there would be those who tried to undermine the progress that had been made. But she was no longer afraid. She knew that she had created something that was stronger than any one person. She had built a team that was committed to the same values and vision, and together they would continue to push the company forward. In the months that followed, the company's performance soared. Profits increased, innovation flourished, and employee satisfaction reached new heights. Naomi knew that the company was on the right track. But more than that, she knew that the changes she had made were not just about numbers and growth. They were about creating a workplace where people felt valued and respected. One day, as Naomi sat in her office, looking out over the city, she thought back to that moment when she had made the decision to fire the executives. It had been a defining moment, one that had changed the course of her career and the company's future. She had been tested, and she had passed. But the real reward wasn't just in the success of the company. It was in knowing that she had stayed true to herself and to her values. Naomi had always known that leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about making a difference. And in that moment, she realized that she had done just that. She had made a difference not just for herself, but for everyone who worked at the company. The company had been transformed, and Naomi had transformed too. She had gone from a leader who was often overlooked to a leader who was admired and respected. But more importantly, she had built something that would last, something that would continue to grow and thrive long after she was gone. A company that valued its people, that valued integrity, and that would always, no matter the challenges, continue to lead with respect and fairness. The company had changed in ways Naomi had only hoped for, and now, as the new leadership team took its place, the transformation was evident. The halls no longer felt stiff and cold. They were filled with conversations and the sound of people working together. There was a renewed sense of purpose in the air. Employees no longer felt like cogs in a machine. They felt like valued contributors, empowered to make decisions and to share their ideas. And that was exactly what Naomi had wanted. As the weeks passed, Naomi could see the shift in the company's performance. Sales were up, productivity was higher, and employees seemed more engaged than ever before. But it wasn't just the numbers that mattered to her. The real measure of success was the culture. It was the way people treated one another, the respect they showed, and the sense of belonging that was growing stronger every day. It was the realization that the company wasn't just a place to work, it was a place to thrive. Naomi's vision was starting to take shape. She had always believed that leadership came from the top, but she also knew that a true leader wasn't someone who just gave orders. They were someone who created an environment where others could grow. She had set the tone by demanding respect for herself, but now she was seeing that respect spread throughout the company. And it wasn't just the new executives who had embraced the change, everyone had. One of the first things Naomi did after making the leadership changes was to hold a company-wide meeting. She wanted to address everyone, not just the executives, and make sure everyone understood what had been happening behind the scenes. The meeting took place in the main conference room, and Naomi stood before a sea of faces. Some were new, having recently joined the company, while others were the employees who had been with her for years, witnessing the company's evolution firsthand. "I want to take a moment to thank you all," Naomi began, her voice calm but filled with gratitude. "I know that change can be difficult, and I know that many of you have been with this company for a long time, through thick and thin. But I want you to know that the changes we've made are for you. They are for a company that values you, that supports you, and that believes in your potential." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "This company is not just a business, it's a community. And as we move forward, I want you to know that we are building a place where everyone can succeed, no matter who they are or where they come from. I believe in each and every one of you, and I believe that together we can achieve things we never thought possible." The room was silent for a moment, but then something remarkable happened. A round of applause started in the back of the room and quickly spread. Naomi felt a surge of emotion as she looked around at the faces in the crowd, faces that were no longer filled with doubt but with hope. Hope that they were part of something bigger, something meaningful. Naomi smiled and the applause grew louder. She had done it. She had created a space where people felt like they could belong, a place where they could thrive, and a place where they could contribute to something greater than themselves. The pride she felt in that moment was beyond words. In the months that followed, the company continued to grow stronger. Naomi worked closely with her new leadership team, ensuring that the values of inclusivity and respect were not just written in the company's mission statement, but were lived out in every interaction, every decision, and every strategy. There were still challenges to face. No company was without its obstacles, but Naomi knew that the foundation she had built was strong enough to withstand whatever came their way. The leadership team worked tirelessly, supporting each other and pushing the company forward. Together, they created initiatives that empowered employees at all levels. Training programs were launched to help people develop new skills, and mentorship programs were put in place to ensure that everyone had the opportunity to learn and grow. Naomi's vision for a company where everyone had a chance to succeed was coming to life, and she could see the results every day. But perhaps the most rewarding aspect of all was the shift in the company's culture. The air was no longer heavy with tension or competition. Instead, there was a spirit of collaboration, where ideas were shared freely, and people were encouraged to think outside the box. The company had become a place where people wanted to be, not just because of the benefits or the salary, but because of the environment that had been created. Naomi's leadership had proven that change was possible, even in the face of adversity. She had turned what had been a company struggling under outdated leadership into a thriving, forward-thinking organization. But she knew that the work was far from done. There was always room for improvement, always another step to take. One afternoon, Naomi received a call from a business partner who had been with the company for years. He told her that he had never seen the company perform so well, both in terms of growth and the morale of the employees. He mentioned how the shift in the company's culture was noticeable, even from the outside. "People are talking about you, Naomi," he said. "They're seeing the change and they're impressed." Naomi felt a swell of pride at his words, but she knew that she couldn't take all the credit. Yes, she had made the difficult decisions, but it was the collective effort of the entire company that had brought about the transformation. It was the work of the new leadership team, the support of the employees, and the belief that things could be different. And of course, it was the values she had instilled in the company from the very beginning, values of respect, integrity, and inclusivity, that had made all the difference. Naomi knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges. There would always be those who questioned her decisions, who doubted the direction of the company, and who were resistant to change. But Naomi was no stranger to adversity. She had faced far worse in her journey, and she had always come out stronger. She knew that the company was now on the right path, and as long as they stayed true to their values, nothing could stop them. As the months turned into years, Naomi continued to lead with the same passion and commitment she had always had. She worked alongside her team, always striving for better ways to serve their employees and their customers. And with each passing day, the company continued to grow, not just in profits, but in the hearts and minds of everyone who worked there. Naomi had done more than just rebuild a company. She had created a legacy of leadership, respect, and opportunity for all. As the months passed, Naomi's leadership continued to make a visible impact on the company. Every day felt like a new opportunity for growth, not just for the business, but for the people who worked there. Naomi knew that the true strength of any company wasn't in its profits or its market position, but in its people. And she had worked tirelessly to create a workplace where every employee felt like they were a part of something bigger, something that truly valued their contributions. The new leadership team, formed with Naomi's clear vision in mind, was thriving. It wasn't just about making decisions anymore. It was about collaborating and listening, ensuring that every voice had a chance to be heard. The once divided and sometimes skeptical workforce had transformed into a united force. They believed in the company's mission because they could see the changes happening in front of them. There was a genuine sense of pride that had been missing for so long, and it wasn't just in the executives, it was in the employees at all levels. One of the key initiatives Naomi had introduced early on was the idea of mentorship. She wanted to make sure that no one felt like they were working alone, that everyone had access to guidance and support as they grew within the company. Employees were encouraged to find mentors, both within their departments and across the company, who could help them reach their professional goals. The idea was simple. If people felt supported, they would thrive, and it worked. In the months that followed, Naomi started to see some of her younger employees, the ones who had been hesitant or unsure of their place within the company, step up in ways she hadn't expected. They were taking on leadership roles, making bold decisions, and contributing ideas that were helping to shape the future of the company. What started as a simple program to encourage growth had evolved into something much more powerful. It had created a culture of collaboration, where people weren't afraid to challenge the status quo, to suggest new ideas, and to take risks. One day, Naomi sat in her office, looking out the window as the city skyline spread out before her. She had spent so many years focused on the challenges, the obstacles, the moments when it felt like the world was against her. But now, as she looked out at the success she had helped build, she couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. She had created something lasting, something that would stand the test of time. The company was stronger than ever, but more importantly, it had become a place where people were proud to work. And that, she knew, was worth more than any profit margin. It was around this time that Naomi received a call from a young employee, someone who had recently joined the company. The employee was excited to speak with her and thanked Naomi for all the changes that had been implemented. "I just wanted to say that your leadership has made a huge difference," the employee said, their voice filled with genuine gratitude. "I've never felt so supported. I know that I'm part of something that really values me." Naomi felt a warmth spread through her chest as she listened to the words. This was the moment she had worked so hard to create. This was the change she had wanted to see. And it was happening right before her eyes, but Naomi didn't take all the credit for this transformation. She knew that it wasn't just her efforts. It was the work of the entire leadership team and the dedication of every employee that had made this possible. Together, they had created an environment where everyone could succeed. It wasn't just about the culture they had built. It was about the people who brought that culture to life every single day. Over time, the company's reputation began to change. It was no longer seen as just another corporate giant. It was recognized as a place that prioritized people, that valued integrity and respect above all else. Other companies started to take notice, and soon, Naomi was being invited to speak at conferences and events, sharing her story and the lessons she had learned along the way. She spoke about leadership, about the importance of fostering an inclusive environment, and about the challenges she had faced as a woman of color in the corporate world. But what Naomi wanted to emphasize most was the idea that leadership wasn't about power. It was about creating opportunities for others to grow. As the years went by, the company continued to thrive. The culture Naomi had worked so hard to cultivate remained strong, and its values of respect, collaboration, and inclusivity became part of the company's identity. Employees came and went, but the foundation remained the same, a commitment to creating a workplace where everyone could succeed. Naomi's own leadership had evolved as well. She had learned so much through the process of rebuilding the company, and she continued to grow both as a leader and as a person. But she never lost sight of the core values that had driven her from the beginning. She remained humble, approachable, and deeply committed to the well-being of the people around her. Naomi knew that leadership wasn't about being in control. It was about empowering others to succeed, to reach their full potential, and to feel that they were valued every single day. One day, Naomi found herself in a meeting with her leadership team, discussing the company's future plans. As she looked around the room, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The faces in front of her weren't just employees, they were leaders in their own right. And each of them was committed to continuing the work she had started, to making the company even better than it was today. "We've come a long way," Naomi said to the group, her voice filled with gratitude. "But we can't stop here. We have to keep moving forward. We have to keep creating opportunities for our people to grow, to succeed, and to thrive. We've built something special here, and it's our job to keep nurturing it." Her team nodded in agreement, ready to take on the next challenge. Naomi knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she was confident that they could handle whatever came their way. Together, they had created something meaningful, something that would last. As Naomi sat back in her chair, a sense of contentment washed over her. She had proven herself not just as a leader, but as someone who could make a lasting impact. And the company, this company that she had poured her heart and soul into, was proof that change was possible. She had shown that with the right leadership, with the right values, anything was possible. Naomi had built a legacy, one that would inspire generations of leaders to come. And as she looked out at the future, she knew that the work she had done would continue to make a difference, long after she had moved on.